Welcome to Small Talk, where each week we sit down to discuss the sermon-based small group questions at Wallula Christian Church.
Hello and welcome back to Wallula's podcast, Small Talk. My name is Zach Bolin, and I am joined, as always, by Craig Archer and Lance Kaufman. No titles today, boys.
All right.
We're just regular people.
I was waiting for it.
You guys made fun of me last week.
I was a regular person last week, too.
Yeah, you made fun of me for not giving you the right titles. All right. Well, we are on Revelation 21, just one more chapter after this. We are looking at heaven, and really more specifically the specifics of John's vision of heaven and how that breaks down. So we look forward to that, but we will start off with our intro question, and it says, did you have your own room as a kid, or did you share a room with siblings? What did you like best and least about that experience? And also, if you could have one thing from that room today, what would it be? So what did you guys have? What was I'll start with you, Craig.
I had my own room.
Okay.
So that was my experience.
Because you and your brother.
Right, yeah. Just one sibling. So we each had our own room. Every once in a while, we would sneak into each other's rooms. Mm-hmm. After it was like we'd go to bed, but then we're like, oh, we're just going to go have a slumber party in another room. So maybe a part of us wanted to share a room.
Yeah.
But as we got older, I was thinking about having my own room and like the things that were in it, kind of reminiscing on that. And when I picture my room, I just think of having a drum set in there. So when I first got my drum set, I put that in my room, and that took up the majority of the room.
Right.
It was like
the
bed, the desk, the dresser, and then just drum set right in the middle.
Right.
And everything worked around it.
Yeah.
But I had my parents bought me a drum set when I was in 6th grade, and that was the beginning of music and all that stuff for me. But that was like a central piece of my room. I just picture that, and I had like stickers all over it.
Well, I was going to ask because I think about my kids' rooms, and anywhere there's a surface, they will fill it with just whatever's around. So did your drum set have like clothes or like things you have to just things get thrown around? Did it, while you weren't playing, did it serve as like a place just to dump stuff on or
I'm sure.
lean stuff against? Or
the stickers was more so like the front bass drum head. I just collected stickers and put stickers all over it. And I also thought about, I had a really big stereo. I feel like that used to be a thing. Like really, really big stereos. The CD changer thing. Because now it's just like, how small can you get your Bluetooth speaker? But I had a huge stereo with stickers covering that too. So if there was a surface, there was going to be stickers on it. Either like bands, or I was a skater kid, so I had like skateboard company stickers all over.
That's funny.
Stuff like that. So
Graham and Saleh each have like a little Amazon like Echo Dot. Hockey pucks thing. That's their whole speaker.
And it's crazy. They like, sound great,
and they just lay there and it plays. Oh man, it's just. I mean, I do it too.
But. I mean, when I had the 5-disc changer, I was like, I can listen to at least 5 CDs, and I never have to.
It was so great.
Little remote.
Did it turn? Remember the ones that turned like a record player, like different spots for the CDs?
I had one that was fancy because it only fit one CD at a time, but I had to feed it all 5 of them. So it put it in and somehow move it around. I thought that was cool because it was smaller. But it was also annoying because I had to feed it and then wait and press number 2 and then feed it and then wait and say, okay, give me the 3rd one. And then and so if you wanted like the 4th one out, it'd be like it wouldn't just pop the whole tray out and then spin it. Anyway. I think I grew up with a bunch of siblings, and so my sister and I, we were a year apart, and so we had our own rooms, but because we were so young, we would a lot of times just share the same bed, just because we wanted to, and then it was like 1st, 2nd grade, because we were just a year apart, and so I remember early on doing that, and then I remember when I moved here to Lansing. And the basement was unfinished, and so as they were building 2 more rooms for us, my sister and I moved here. So I roomed with my brother Brett, and we shared a room for about a year. and then he got his own. So I was on and off as far as sharing rooms.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like the positives and negatives, really the positive is the same for both, is that like when lights go out, you're still hanging out talking, like, because there's so many times you're just not tired and your parents are like, go to bed, turn off the lights. And so you would just, talk about whatever. But, the pros about having my own room, especially all of high school, I had my own room, was I get to do whatever I want. It's my room. I can, you're kind of limited on how you decorate your own room. And the thing I would keep is, the thing I didn't like about my own room is that whatever was messy was all my fault. So you could kind of tag team cleaning up if it was both of yours, but it's all on you. And but the thing I liked most was I forget, at least a few years, but my dad had this old fish tank, and it was octagon shape, and like I couldn't even put my arms around it, so it was really big, and it was probably 3 feet deep. Like, it was big, and it was on the stand, and so he had it stored forever, and I was like, oh, that'd be kind of cool. So he's like, yeah, go for it. So I think he was just happy that someone's using it. So I'd never had a fish tank before, and he's like, oh, you got to get these cichlids, and you got to get a Picostomus, the little sucker fish, and we got some Oscars, and they're big ones. And anyway, so we had our own. I even trained one of the Oscars. I would dip my finger in water and then put it in the fish food and just hold it above the water, and it would come out and bite it. Like, it would kind of get it. Once they get big enough, they'll eat minnows. And so I just thought that was really fun. And anyway, so he hooked me up with some good fish, and then I had that for a few years, and then after that, I kind of was tired of it. But I told Maeve, my wife, I was like, well, you guys know she is, but for the listeners, I was like, we should get a fish tank. And she's like, no, we don't. That thing is just going to get dirty. No one's going to want to clean it. And I can't argue with that, because that's exactly what happened with me. But I was in 8th grade. I'm sure it would be different now. And but we'd probably give it to the kids, and they would say they'd not clean it as much.
Yeah.
But anyway, that fish tank was probably my favorite thing. And anyway, what about you, Lance?
Well, first I'm just thinking it's funny, the fish tank will get dirty and nobody wants to clean it. And we all have kids, and that's true of them too.
Right.
They get dirty and nobody wants to clean them, and we still do that. But so maybe try that with the fish tank. But I don't remember sharing a room. I maybe before I was really little when we moved into the house I grew up in. My parents built that house, and so we moved from one place to another, and maybe before we moved I shared a room, but I don't remember that. I do remember, though, at one point moving to a room in the basement, and my dad finished that room, so it was a way bigger room because, Anyway, it was a bigger room, and I just thought it was so cool because, he built a closet, and he built bookshelves, and it's like, oh, this is for your room. And, I just thought that was so cool. And a couple things I remember about that room is that one year for Christmas, I got for Christmas a 13-inch black and white television, and to watch the 2 channels we got on the rabbit ears on the black and white. And I remember hooking up our Atari. We got an Atari, and hooked that up and played Atari games in black and white, and so I remember that. That was kind of cool. But if there's one thing I remember playing, Stratomatic Baseball, which is a board game.
Oh, okay.
Baseball, and in using, creating my own variation of that with baseball cards, which I'm sure was just a mess and nonsense. But I remember doing that and thinking, oh man, this is so awesome, and laying it out on the floor to do that. And so if there's one thing I could have from that room, it'd be Stratomatic baseball from that room. That's what I remember. So.
How do you play it with cards? Like, how does someone pitch or hit or? Yeah,
so the game comes with cards, and they're assigned certain values or whatever, and you roll the dice. And,
okay.
And then the cards tell you what happens. And
it sounds like Dungeons and Dragons, except with jocks.
Sort of. I've never thought of it
Dungeons and
that
Dragons.
Way.
Get those dice.
I've never thought of it.
Were
that
they 20 he cited
but-
at all? Was there?
No, you're right. No. Hey, did you ever do that, like role-playing games?
I did
Have you
once,
ever?
and my dad was like, he was a newscaster, and so he said in the 80s there's some stories
Oh,
about.
yeah.
And so, but I had friends who did it, and I went behind his back, and because he's like, I don't want you ever doing that. But the guys I knew was like,
Yeah.
we were in band, they were in band, and they're like, that's really fun. I was like,
Right.
okay. And I tried it once, and it was fine. I wasn't
Yeah.
that impressed with it. It was okay.
Right.
But my dad was like, never again.
Never
So
again.
I was like,
Yeah.
okay, whatever. And now it's like,
Yeah, that was a big deal. I remember,
Yeah.
and people.
yeah.
Yeah, I had friends who were really into it.
Yeah.
And they played all the time. And so finally one time they got me to come and play. And I just remember thinking, this is the dumbest thing ever. I mean, I
Yeah.
did not have that same experience.
Yeah.
And it just, just the, you roll the dice and the whatever they call him, the moderator.
Dungeon Master.
The game master or something.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
He's just kind of making up the
Right,
story
yeah.
as you go. And
That's what, when I was in high school, I had some friends that were into it, and they started explaining it and how you just, someone makes it up as it goes. And I was
Right,
like,
right.
I don't
Yeah.
think I'm going to like this.
Yeah.
Well,
No.
part of me thinks like
No.
I'm just not that creative, or it's like, it just seems like there's a lot. Like, oh, you're this, but
Right.
Yeah.
your strength is this, but your intelligence
Yeah.
is this, and it can't go against this. And I was like,
Right.
And I kept waiting to like, are we playing?
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, you came to this door. What do you do? I'm like, I don't know.
I didn't have
walk
any
in.
moral misgivings
Right,
necessarily,
right.
but I think I'm just too competitive.
Right.
Like I want to know why I'm winning or losing.
This could be a
You
good
know,
podcast. We'll just play one
As real
as
time.
complete novice. Just
Turn it off. Turn it off.
No,
We gotta
yeah,
talk.
we.
No. What was our intro question?
I don't know.
Rooms or something?
If you had a room on your own,
We are not supporting
Question number one. What's your experience
role-playing
with Dungeons and
games.
Dragons?
Yeah, don't.
Well, at least the people now have an idea of what our staff meetings are like.
Right,
We
right.
have
that
Come
is,
back to-
that's kind of
How did
true.
we get on this? Yeah. Well, let's get us back on topic.
How nerdy are your backgrounds? That'll be our next opening
Oh, yeah.
question.
I have some stories about that. Without even Dungeons and Dragons, I have some answers. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Transitioning as we look at heaven. We'll have to make this jump now. We're actually in the second part of chapter 21. We're looking at verses 9 through the rest of the chapter through 27. And Lance, you had preached on really, as we see the angel showing John what this heaven looks like, and we really get into the specifics of. I was even kind of wondering, like, how do you preach on this, where it's just breaking down the I'm going to say not dynamics, but the dimensions of what heaven
Right.
is. This idea of a cube and all this imagery of different stones. So we're going to combine questions 3 and 7, which is kind of just initial observations. So number 3 says, what are your observations about this city? About what it looks like, about the 12 gates and 12 foundations and, the huge wall. And also number 7, we'll kind of combine it with that. What do you think about the idea that there's no temple in heaven? So broad question, but after hearing the sermon and reading through it, what are your observations and impressions about some of the imagery that we see there? So whoever wants to take that one.
I guess I'll go.
Oh, okay, yeah. I should just be like, you, go.
Yeah. I mean, we all have, I think,
We already have
prepared
answers,
something.
so
So,
yeah. It's not
it's like we're sitting in class and we're like, don't call on me.
Yeah. I'm still taking notes while you're right. Oh, that's a good one.
No, I this is the last 2 chapters of Revelation is something that you'll hear it referenced or preached on in isolation sometimes. Like, we're going through the whole thing, so obviously we're going to get to this point. But so I've read these 2 chapters before numerous times,
Right.
and it wasn't until now that the image of the cube really stuck out to me.
Yeah.
And it points back, like Lance talked about it, and reading some of the resources I had, points you back to the tabernacle and specifically the Holy of Holies. And in the Old Testament, in the Holy of Holies, that always has fascinated me, for a lot of reasons. And it was so unique in how the steps that the priest had to take to get to the Holy of Holies, and filled with smoke. And you read about, like, there were bells tied to the robes in case you don't hear the bells anymore, then they can drag the priest out. Like,
right.
This is like some scary stuff, really.
Yeah. If he dies in there.
Yeah.
That's
like, if he messes up and does something incorrectly, like, that's it. He's over.
Right.
And so all of that just has fascinated me. And when I think about that in the grand scope of the Bible and the whole narrative of Scripture, I know the Bible Project, they talk about it in the terms of, they say, like, there's like God space and human space, and that's kind of the language that they use. And in the garden, those two things were completely overlapped.
Right.
Sin entered, and then they're two separate spaces. But when you get to the tabernacle, it's as if they start to kind of intersect a little bit. There's like a little in between.
Right.
And so what I see there is God has this desire to dwell with us, to have a relationship with his creation. And so that's kind of this beginning of it, this overlap. So what's really unique about reading this chapter, and then for me, like, this light bulb moment of, like, oh, it's a cube, it's pointing back to the Holy of Holies. Again, it's this desire for God to dwell with his creation, for there to be perfect unity with his creation. We've read it over and over. There won't be any more evil and darkness and chaos, uncertainty. It's going to be this perfect dwelling in the Holy of Holies, in God's presence. His glory is going to be there, and we don't have to worry about being killed and dragged out by someone, So that is, I'm still kind of like wrapping my mind around that. Like, God wants us to be in his presence, and he's done something about it. Jesus has gone to the cross to accomplish this. And that's what we have to look forward to. So I think it's so cool that those details are included, that John wrote those in there so it can point us back to the Holy of Holies. And it's like, okay, there was this intersection and it wasn't totally there.
Right.
But now in 21, 22, like, it's going to overlap and it's going to remain that way forever.
Right.
And so I think that is so cool in this final section of Revelation.
It is awesome because, you think about, you mentioned that sort of intersection with the tabernacle or the temple in the most holy place, and the place of God and the place of people kind of overlap, and in this new covenant with Jesus makes that better. Right, but we're still sort of in that tabernacle era, sort of, right? We have these, we talk about them here at Wallula sometimes as when heaven collides with earth, right? And that happens, maybe baptism. There's this collision, right? And every week when we celebrate communion, there's this collision. And so Jesus has made, he's made it so each one of us can be involved in that intersection, and we don't have to rely on the high priest once a year to enter into the most holy place. We get to all the time, through prayer and study, and because the Holy Spirit makes his home in us when we're baptized. And so there's these intersections or these collisions in that space, and yet it's a now not yet kind of thing, because it's still, there's more on the way. When it's completely, I don't know if completely is the right word. I feel like when I've used that language sometimes in this series, and probably just because I'm not smart enough, to figure out a better way, because it's not like our relationship with Jesus isn't sufficient. That's not what I'm trying to say. But there's more yet to come. It gets better, sort of idea. So
it's funny because I think before I started getting into this, and with the sermon series, and even before Ozark or whatever else, before Bible college, this is probably one of the few passages I at least had heard of more. Streets of Gold,
right?
Things like that. And so I think before all this, I just was more focused on the physical aspect. This is what it's going to look like, and I just assumed, well, that's what it says, so it's in the Bible, so that's it.
We've talked about it numerous times, how little things in Revelation get worked into kind of like pop culture.
Right.
We talked about that with like 666, but even that, like the streets of gold and the pearly gates, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like everyone's like, oh yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny because now that we've slowly gone through and kind of really looked at each passage, and especially the Old Testament references, and I hold on less to that. Like, is it really streets? Look. And we've said this a lot. We don't know, but I kind of think no, right? Like my initial impressions when I read this, like what is the imagery it's creating of perfection, of beauty, of all of this, and so that part impresses me. It doesn't impress me as much. That's not really stands out. But like you guys have said, the like what is the imagery we get from these walls that are so thick? Like the idea of protection, the idea that. It will be, there's no temple. And I think that's the one that, you already mentioned, to me was more fun than like Streets of Gold.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, wow, the imagery of no temple. And something I talk to the students a lot about is, when they ask questions about heaven, I always say, the closest imagery we have to that is the garden. This is what the original plan was had we not sinned, we would have been in the garden. And so, there was no temple in the garden. He wasn't Adam and Eve, and he's like, I need you to start building. Here's the blueprints. So that I could be with you. That would have been crazy because he's already with them. And so I'm reminded, when I read the idea that there's no temple, is that it's just like it was at the beginning, where it's God with man, and there's no more sin, there's no more brokenness, and it's the way that it was originally supposed to be. And so that's kind of what excites me, and the imagery I get from this, observation about the city. I'm sure people have gone through and said like which each of these stones, what they probably represent. I don't think you mentioned that, but
one of my commentaries started listing like all these things that could symbolize.
And I was like, I didn't want to.
Honestly,
try.
I didn't. I just skipped it.
Yeah, I was just saying. I was like, I don't even want to go down this rabbit hole. I'm sure someone has done the work and be like, it's probably this, and this ruby represent. I'm like, okay, fine. All right, who knows? But yeah, the bigger imagery that I get from this is that. Especially in verse 27, nothing impure will ever enter it, nor will anyone who does what is shameful or deceitful, but only those whose names are written in the Lamb's book of life. And I just think, man, it sounds so good. And so just to have this perfect relationship again, like it was in the beginning, is the big idea, the big imagery that comes out that I hold on to more than the how does this thing look?
Yeah.
But yeah.
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 So you mentioned the garden, and in Ezekiel chapter 28, in verse 13, he says, "You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was your covering, sardius, maybe, topaz and diamond, beryl, onyx and jasper, sapphire, emerald and carbuncle, and crafted in gold were your settings and your engravings. On that day you were created, they were prepared, you were anointed, guardian cherubim. I placed you, you were on the holy mountain of God, in the midst of the stones of fire you walked." And so a very similar description, isn't it? On a mountain, here's the garden, on a mountain with all these jewels in the mountain. And I think the biggest thing for me, there's so many things you can talk about, right? The cube and 1,500 miles high and long and wide and all those things. And you think of 1,500 miles high, that boggles the mind. Like Mount Everest is 6 miles above sea level.
Right.
Right. And, bad things happen when people scale Mount Everest.
Right.
Well, this is a side note, but I saw someone, Craig, I think Craig was there, but someone preached on this one, and they had made a scale replica. Like, here's the Earth, and so it would actually, and you could see it from space, this cube. if it was on the earth, and I was like, okay. Yeah,
I think when he showed it, I remember you specifically laughing out loud because it was so ridiculous.
Yeah, and I was like, I don't think it's that. I don't think that's what it's gonna.
Yeah. One scholar who I really respect, like he's way smarter than me for sure. All those things. But he said, well, I think this cube is like the headquarters of the new Earth, and like it's Justice League or something, and okay, maybe, and I think the point is, man, that's really high.
Right.
There's nothing higher than that. You can't go any further.
Right.
It's pretty glorious, and so all those things, you list the jewels that I can't pronounce, and so that's got to be cool, and that'd be good. And streets of gold, like you said, all these things. But to me, it's the fact that it's the restoration to the garden, and that it's physical. Sometimes we talk about going to heaven like that's the ultimate goal, and I don't know the best way to talk about it or describe it, but at the very best, heaven is this intermediate place. And we are coming down with that giant cube, or however you want to think about it, to this new earth and this new creation that, and not for nothing, there's two Greek words for new. At least two Greek words for new. And one means brand new. Like it's a brand new baby. I heard one scholar describe it, right? He's
as opposed to those old babies.
Well, something wasn't there before,
right?
And now it is. It's brand new. And another one that means like restored, redeemed, renovated.
Made new.
Like you'd take a old car and fix it up. You'd renovate it and make it new. And it's that Greek word that's used here in Revelation 21 with this new heaven and this new earth. There's something old that's being made new, and it's this hope of a physical place where we will have these, all these blessings, right? That you read through this, and man, just think about it, and I know that here most of our experience is not an experience of want. Most of us, we probably haven't really known what it means to go to the cupboard and there's nothing there. To be unsure of where our next meal comes from. But there are believers all around the world and throughout history who have certainly experienced that. And to tell somebody who's not sure where they can get clean water, or they don't have enough access to that there's a river of living water flowing through, that they're, this Sunday we're going to talk about these trees that God is like the fruit of the month club. He's the original fruit of the month club. There's 12 different kinds of fruit on the tree. There's just more than enough. And man, what a blessing, right? What a blessing for there to be no more pain and hurt and suffering, and no more death. Right? I mean, what a blessing that is physically, that there's no sin or evil present. Right? I mean, I think we underestimate the consequence and the hurt and the just weight that sin has, almost by like secondhand smoke.
Right. Well, we don't.
Just,
we're around it so much. I think we just don't even think about it. It's almost familiar to us,
right?
So we don't realize.
Yeah.
Like kind of like with secondhand smoke, you don't think about it until you come in contact with it, and you're like, oh, this is.
I'm not sure we can fathom a world without it.
Right. Oh yeah.
And here it is. And so that leads to mental blessings, right? That Isaiah 65:17 talks about, the old is gone, the new has come, and you won't even remember the things of the past. And so, again, one guy said, well, that means you won't have any bad memories. And I'm not sure if I'm there,
Yeah.
But I do think, I agree with them. I don't think like our memories will be wiped clean of things that have happened that were bad, quote unquote, right?
Yeah.
But that we'll see them in perfection. We'll know. We'll be on the other side of eternity, and we'll know, the why,
Right.
that we couldn't figure out before, and so it'll be made perfect, and our relationships will continue, and it's just the spiritual blessings of being forgiven and made new and perfect, and that it'll be full-time worship. And I don't know exactly what that looks like, but there's an awful lot of worship and revelation. There's an awful lot of harps and singing and whatever that imagery is and how it'll play out. But we will be in the presence of God, and that's really that's the biggest wow from Revelation 21 is the glory of God and being in the presence of the glory of God, coming face to face with God. And, I'm not sure where to start or end with that, right?
Yeah.
But to me, that's the takeaway. We'll be in the presence of God and everything's new. This physical earth. Pretty cool deal.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, this is a side question I have, but I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot. You've kind of answered a little bit already, but when we talk about new heaven and new earth, and I sometimes I realize when I'm talking about it or with the students, I go back and forth when I'm talking about the heaven and then the earth. And so it's not so much like which one do you think it is, but are you making a distinction between one and the other? Or are you saying they're both synonymous? When we talk about, because we think of, I know heaven's not up in the sky, but like physical earth versus, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
or was that going to be the heaven?
Well, I think there's different things. We mean different things sometimes in Scripture when we use the term heaven, right? And so sometimes we mean the presence of God,
Right.
being in the presence of God. And so when we die, Paul talks about it, 1 Corinthians, as soon as we die, as followers of Christ, we are in the presence of God. And that's typically what we refer to as going to heaven. And so when I say that's not the ultimate goal, the ultimate goal is because heaven is coming to earth. And sometimes in Scripture, when we say heaven, we mean, the space, the atmosphere, the cosmos, the sky, whatever.
Right.
I think that's what we're talking about here in Revelation 21.
Right.
That's being made new.
Right.
It's a new creation. So it's the whole universe being recreated. And so I'm not sure if that's where you're going.
Well,
but,
yeah, and then I don't really know because I wasn't planning on asking that question. But when we talk about the new heaven and new earth, is there is it once Jesus comes back for this, and it's all new again, it's here on earth, but made new.
Right.
That earth is made new and it's perfected, and we are, because in the sermon we were talking about, the guy had the cube on earth.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's where it was. The heaven was here and not distinct yet. You know what I mean?
Right, because it's coming down.
I haven't thought through this, so that's why I'm...
Right, because it's coming down.
Right.
And so heaven comes to earth.
Right.
And this physical earth is made new. Now, what that looks like exactly, I'm not sure.
Right,
I'm not sure if I'd plant a giant cube on this earth.
Right.
It's way bigger than the earth.
Right, yeah.
So, more square footage like we talked about Sunday if you just do
but even
the math.
the imagery of just that this heaven, this perfection, this area, the land will be on earth but perfect.
Yeah.
And
It'll be perfect. And I've said this before, if you're just asking me for my opinion,
right.
I'm not sure. I don't know what the distinction will be exactly between being in the presence of Jesus and heaven, this intermediate state. Some people talk about an intermediate state, and I'm uncomfortable with that. But I don't have a better way to describe it.
Okay.
Because it's we see things in a linear laying out, and Jesus hasn't returned yet. So there's this time on that timeline when Great Aunt Irma died, and Jesus hasn't come back yet. So where is she? She's in the presence of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just not sure when we're in the presence of Jesus that there'll be I think we'll know that Jesus is coming back, but it'll be pretty great in heaven, and then this new earth, I think, will just involve everyone,
right,
as a follower of Jesus. So yeah.
Very cool. It's fun to think about.
Yeah.
So it really is fun to think about and talk about and kind of, get different, I guess, opinions, but, on what we think it may mean. But as we look at the questions, we kind of want to bring it back home to, well, what does this mean for us now, though? Right? And so number 10 says, how can Walula, this is how can any believer, how can we better reflect the hope that we have in heaven? And number 12, what's one takeaway from this chapter? So it's one thing to talk about it in theory and all this, but really, this is given to us for a reason. So how does this affect us? How do we live it out? How does this change how we interact with others? And this awesome hope that we have, how can we share this with others? So practically, what does this chapter do for us? What can we do differently because of it? I'll go first on it. I really, I don't know if I say wrestled, but I'm like, okay, I like reading this stuff, but I really had to sit and think, like, how does this change, my life? How does it, with my perspective? And I came up with a few things. One is not to put so much stock into this world, that ultimately I know because of Jesus where I'm going. And so anytime I start to just elevate what's going on here as if it were the most important thing, I think I'm losing sight of what matters. And so I think it was that C.S. Lewis quote from last week, those who, and I'm going to butcher it because I don't remember the quote, but those who focus on heaven more do more,
right,
have better
no
impact.
earthly good.
No earthly good, but also like we have a better impact, those who adequately focus on heaven, because we understand what's important and what's not.
Right.
And so, and I think about practically, what does it look like to put too much stock? We have elections next week. So I think we should definitely care. But sometimes we put too much stock into who's in power, our possessions or money or stuff. Like we have to get that, or our own comfort. Like that's what matters most. And when we think that the things of this world are the things I have to have or need to have, or it starts to look like you don't really think that heaven is going to be better than that. That it has to be this or nothing. The other thing about the hope that we have in heaven is when I look at heaven, not only what it's like, but who's there. The every tribe, tongue, and nation. It once again solidifies that people are what matters most to God, and Satan is so good at separating us, at dividing us. And so I did this quick thing of like, how do we divide ourselves? Well, geographically, by if it's someone from a different country or a different state, a different town, a different part of town, a different school that we go to, another neighborhood. Oh, they're in that neighborhood. A different church. We start to like view ourselves as differently from them. Different ages, male, female, if you're rich or poor, even sports teams. Like we will find ways to divide and judge and hold that over someone as if it were, like we can't engage with them. And so if Satan is constantly trying to divide us, just recognizing I need to lean in, even to people that I disagree with, because ultimately that's who matters,
Right.
And then the last one is this idea that heaven will be perfect, and that we can't fathom it. And so when life is hard here, that is okay. We are never told it's going to be easy. And so, how come some good people go through bad things on this earth? And, we're not told it's going to be easy on this earth, but we are told that it should feel like, you don't belong here. It should be hard. It makes sense that it is, because we're told this world is not your own. It should feel off. And so I can be at peace. I can be at peace in the midst of trials or struggles on this earth, because I know where my home is, that I am going to a place that is perfect, that God has prepared for me. And so I can I can be at peace when things are not at peace around me, and I can offer that peace to other people because I have a hope, and they have a hope that through Jesus, one day we'll be in heaven. And so, you think about people who are persecuted. Paul was in prison, and they still had this peace, right, that they could offer even in the midst of sin and brokenness because of this chapter, the hope that we have through heaven. So anyway, I could keep going, but that's kind of some of the stuff I have of offering hope to other people in the midst of what this world has. Craig, what do you got? What are we thinking about this?
Really, yeah, along the same lines as what you said, but I was thinking about just some of the big truths that we read about in this section from a Sunday, and really the fact that there is room for everyone. So if you focus on that, there is room for everyone. And we talked about last week being heavenly minded. And I think that's a big thing throughout the entire book of Revelation, is setting our minds on eternity.
Right.
And so I was kind of pairing those two ideas together in my mind. If there really is room for everyone, and we are going to be heavenly minded, having eternity at the forefront of what we say, what we do. And Lance talked about, he mentioned the already not yet tension. It's like we should be living as citizens of heaven right now, which is a really hard thing to do. Like you just said, like it's so easy to get distracted and our attention gets pulled towards like the election coming up, and we start to like really dwell on that and think like, oh, could things be ruined because of this result or whatever, and we can't,
Are we going to get that pool in Lansing?
Right? Is the pool going to happen?
Yeah.
But no, I just think about those things, and like into what we were talking about at the beginning, the God's space, our space. When Jesus showed up on the scene, that was another intersection of heaven and earth kind of coming together. And, when he shows up, it's like he's healing people and kind of ushering in heaven into this earth a little bit, being this light into the darkness. And so really that's like the Holy Spirit is in us. And so that's our role now as citizens of eternity, is to provide hope to other people, knowing that there's room for that person. And that's really how we have to live, is as followers of Jesus, knowing that we are sealed and waiting for that day of that perfect union. Other people have that opportunity, and so we need to be a light and a beacon of hope that's going to put that message forth for everyone. So that's really what I've been thinking about as far as really applying this passage and taking kind of some other themes in Revelation.
Yeah. You guys nailed it. I mean, this Sunday we're going to wrap up this series and wrap up Revelation and last chapter 22, and just talk about waiting with purpose. And that's, we're called to be, the hands and feet of Jesus, to share his love in this world. And I'm reminded of the Lord's Prayer, right? Thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. And someday it's going to come, literally. And completeness and fullness. But I always think, we should think of that. We should be praying, that your kingdom is coming, and that we're living in a way that helps build his kingdom here, and so that it's coming and coming and coming until Jesus returns, and we have a role to play in that. And just you look at Matthew 5 and the Beatitudes, the meek will inherit the earth. Just the attitude and the way we ought to be living that Jesus prescribes in Matthew 5 is what you guys were talking about, and just showing people the way to Jesus, and not giving. This sounds confrontational, and I don't think it needs to be, but not giving ground on the fact that there really is a resurrection. You know, that because Jesus rose from the dead, we have hope in that same kind of resurrection, right? There's, you know, we talked several weeks ago about these 4 millennial views, and there are probably strengths in all of the millennial views, or at least most of them, and you know, the strength of post-millennialism is that it says things are going to get better. Why? Because the church is here.
Yeah.
And because the church is the hands and feet of Jesus, you know, things should be getting better. And that's real strength. We ought to be trying to love people more and to share that, and as we share the gospel, then more people are followers of Jesus, and that should have a positive effect on the world around us, and just I'm reading this book, and I'm probably, you know, I've kind of been jumping around as we've studied Revelation, so I've got most of it read, but he's a guy, and I forget his name, so I apologize, but you know, has a post-millennial view, and but I've listened to him on several occasions online and whatnot, and I just really enjoy him. I mean, he's smart and communicates well, and it's down to earth, and so but with a lot of substance behind what he's saying, and so you know, I disagree with him on some things, but I can learn from this guy and all those things, and worship with him and all that stuff. But he says this. He says, but resurrection life and power in the middle of history. All right. So Jesus was raised from the dead in the middle of history, kind of, you know, that's the crux of history.
Right. Yeah.
And now, whenever a believer passes away, you know, there's kind of that first resurrection, right? We're in the presence of Jesus. So that's in the middle of history. That resurrection, life, and power in the middle of history is a nightmare for principalities and powers, right? So that's the enemy, the evil one, and everything that he's doing. And their only device is to persuade the churches to stop talking about it. But we believe, and therefore we must speak. Yeah. Sometimes we shy away from, I think, the big picture of Christianity, because the story is that this guy was born to a virgin, lived and ministered, and by the way, along the way, performed all these miracles. Then he died on the cross to take the weight of our sins with him, a substitutionary death, raised from the dead on the third day, and now we can too. You know, and that's always been a big bite to take. That's always been a big, okay, I believe. And maybe especially in kind of a postmodern world, it's a bigger bite to take. You know, it's a bigger, okay, I believe statement. And so as believers, though, we can't shy away from that. You know, that's still, don't let somebody fool you into thinking that the point of Christianity, I want to be careful here, because we are about like feeding the hungry and housing the homeless, and we're about those things. But the point of Christianity is not to heal those physical hurts. the point of Christianity is eternity. That chapter 21 and 22 of Revelation is really true. And that there's a home forever and ever and ever in the presence of Jesus. And that we can experience that same kind of resurrection. Don't let anybody take that away from you as a believer and say, well, no, that's not really what it means. That's what the book means. And so we've got to be about that story, sharing that story. And part of the way we share that story is by helping those in need, is by being kind to others, and that's part of the way that we help to do that. But that's the whole big point to me. That's how we can make a difference and live out heaven here.
Yeah, that's really good. No, very good stuff. We are going to finish off next week, Revelation 22. If you're still with us, we have one more week left. We'll see what the future holds after that for this series or for Small Talk. But we're so glad that you guys joined us for 21. We look forward to talking again next week. And we'll see you later.
All right.